Baltimore City is one of the highest crime cities in America. And with over 17,000 vacants within the city, this leaves a perfect opportunity for squatters, loiterers, thieves, and drug dealers to unfortunately engage in a lot of criminal enterprise or even just get in the way of your real estate investing journey. So today I wanted to go ahead and give you my experience on this. Some of you may know this as a bit of a reshoot of a previous video I did on this. I wanted to go ahead and refilm it just to kind of change a little bit of the narrative here, but also to maybe share a few more techniques I've learned along the way. So anyone who has watched my channel for a long period of time, you know that yes, I own multiple properties within Baltimore City, 6 now as of this point, and I manage many more with my partners especially. I am clearly not from Baltimore City to anyone who is actually lived in Baltimore City for quite some time. They can tell I'm not a local or a native to the area. I'm exploring most of this for the first time only 2.5 years ago. So I represent realistically many of you, my viewers, who probably also are not from Baltimore City. And so that leaves a lot of hesitation. A lot of new investors like myself only hear the stories that you hear about on the news. You hear about all the crime and everything. A lot of positive elements of this city are kind of left out of the picture. I will admit that as I've been investing in Baltimore City, I've actually grown a lot more appreciation for it, and I like it actually a lot more than I actually expected. It's so much to say is that before, while I didn't think I would ever live in the city, I actually would happily do so now. Now, before I begin, I want you to note that the city was not always this way. Baltimore City was actually a very thriving city, and unfortunately, due to a lot of segregation issues and racism and a history of systemic problems within the city, which are all historically accurate, and you can easily look this up, the city over time became a place of this sort of decay, and now us investors are trying to bring it back to its old former glory. If you're interested in the systemic racism and institutions that made it this way, you can definitely look that up. There's a lot of books on that, but for this video, I don't want to focus on why it became that way. I want to focus on the fact that it is that way now, and that we have to deal with this as investors. So let's go into, first off, how we deal with that and maybe some tips and strategies about how to protect your investment property from all the criminal elements. So first, let's analyze, why are we even investing in these neighborhoods anyway? Many of you out there might be thinking, okay, if there's drug dealers and loiterers around your property, then clearly it must not be a good place to invest. Well, unfortunately, that's not really how it works in Baltimore City. It's not easily that simple. Baltimore City is a very block by block type of area. Honestly, you can have $400,000 properties in one area, and then literally by crossing the street, you suddenly plummet down to $70,000 and below dollar value homes. This kind of transition happens repeatedly all throughout the city. This is because the vacants are all throughout the city, and the development and the process of, I'm going to call essentially gentrification, but I mean realistically just new developments kind of raising values throughout the area, that is kind of sparsely located. And so you will be dealing with many of these criminal elements even if you invest in only high-end home areas of Baltimore City. Now, one of the first things I want to go ahead and get out of the way is you shouldn't necessarily be alarmed by maybe groups of people sitting on the steps of your house or your renovation project. This is actually a very common thing in Baltimore. It's a common thing for residents of the neighborhood to maybe while walking around, they might sit on the steps or stoop of various properties throughout the city. Sometimes you're going to find that they've sat on your property because it's vacant and no one's necessarily kicking them off of it. You actually see these common "do not sit on the steps" signs on either on the steps themselves or near it, in order to get people to stop sitting on the steps of their property. This is a very common culture or tradition within the city of Baltimore, so you shouldn't necessarily be alarmed if this is happening to your property. Realistically, they're not trying to bother the property or really bother you. You can usually just walk right on by them and they'll move out of your way, and it's not really a big deal. Sometimes these people who are technically loitering around your property might actually just ask you for side hustles or work. Maybe they want to cut your grass for you for a little bit of money, or maybe even paint for you. Now, I don't necessarily hire them for these tasks. I like my contractors to do that personally because of the relationship I'm building with my contractors. But I have actually hired young kids throughout the neighborhood, paid them like $30 to pick up the garbage around my property just to keep it clean. Because if you don't, then the city inspectors will fine you for this. So that's something, just an example of the various tasks that I might give them. But ultimately, what the main point is, do not necessarily be alarmed if you have to walk through a group of people in order to get to your house. The more you visit the house, the less this will actually happen. Now, if there is a criminal element around your house, oftentimes it is in the form of drug dealers who are hanging out on the corners, especially if your house is a corner unit, or in the case of thieves who want to steal the copper within your house. That electric copper lines that you have stringing throughout your house is actually very valuable. You can sell it and make quite a profit off of it. Also, the appliances within your house are another target, so that is what they really want. As far as the drug dealers, they actually oftentimes do not care about your house whatsoever, and they really don't want anyone harassing the house because cops will often come around the house if, like, let's say you're calling the police because your house is being burglarized. We're going to go into how we can play on that dynamic later because there's some creative solutions we can employ to have drug dealers actually stop the thieves from stealing from your house because of this fact. But essentially, those are the two elements you're dealing with. As far as the loiterers, I wouldn't really bother with them. After repeated visits from you and your contractors, they will tend to disappear over time because you're constantly getting in their way of just sitting around. So that's really how I would approach that subject. So let's go into the actual house itself. What we're really concerned about is the thieves, the ones going to your house and stealing the things from your house. Now, the first piece of advice I have for you is to become familiar at the property and the location. So you need to visit the property often. I would recommend at least 3 times a week, constantly stopping by. If you have the same contractors constantly stopping by, then this gives the house a lot of activity. The thing is, they become used to you. You become part of their neighborhood. At first, they're probably not going to want to talk to you as much, and they're probably not going to like you as much, at least seemingly so, because you're new to the neighborhood and they don't know who you are. But after a while, they just know that you're simply renovating the property and they don't mind you at all. So I would definitely get accustomed to visiting as often as possible so that they get used to you. Another step is going to be about the electrical rough-in. Remember earlier I'd mentioned that the copper out of the electrical lines is what they want to take from you. So if you're doing rough-in for electrical, let's say you're doing a full gut rehab, then you want to first make sure the electrical is the last step you do. You want to make sure the HVAC and the plumbing go in first, and then you have the electrical. Make sure before the electrical is even in, schedule your installation and schedule your inspections, and then make sure it all aligns after your electrical is going to get finished. You can coordinate with your electrical contractor on that. The purpose of this is to make sure you have as little time as possible between when the electrical is first installed and then the walls are closed in with drywall. Once the walls are closed in drywall, the amount of copper that the thieves are able to steal is going to be lessened quite a bit. So even if they manage to get into the home, which we can talk about ways to stop that from happening, but even if they do, you won't see as much damage. It won't be as expensive for you. So I would absolutely try to minimize that time in between and make sure you get that electrical inspection and then get right into the installation and the walls being closed right in. Now, as far as stopping them from getting into the property, what we realistically want to do is make it as difficult as possible. If someone wants to get into your house, they will get in. If they have to use any means necessary, they're going to figure out a way in your house. But if you make it really inconvenient for them, most of them will just simply move on to the next house. So this can be in the form of various different methods, maybe bars on the windows. These aren't actually that expensive and can even protect the glass from being broken. If you've replaced the windows, then many of you can feel the woe of having to necessarily keep paying people to replace the glass within the window. Remember, don't replace the entire window, just the glass if that's what's broken. But that will prevent them from being able to get in through the windows themselves. If you want, you can make the bars more ornate. They sell many different versions of that will make it stand out, not as much in the neighborhood. It'll make it, pretty much where it's kind of almost a decoration and part of the house itself. Another thing are door braces. There's a lot of these different type of door jams, door braces. I mean, however you want to describe them, you can find lots of them. If you can, make it where your contractors are really opening everything through one part of the house. The front door most specifically, if you can. Otherwise, every other door should be completely braced. I would recommend, even as far as I go, I even nail planks of wood so that the door cannot be opened. Multiple planks of wood just stripped across the door. You can do door jams, door braces. Your contractors should know they should only enter through one part of the house. A lot of times I just have my contractors throw trash out the window into the backyard, and then I have trash haul guys pick it up once it's piled up enough. If they really need to get out back, then you can have one of the door braces that are a little easier from the inside, so they can open it up, throw their stuff out, and bring it back in. You want to make this as easy as possible for them, so that way they remember to, re-jam the door when they're done using it. Also, if you have too many doors, I would recommend getting rid of some. So let's say you have a basement where there's two access ways, one in the back and then one on the side. Well, that's not really that necessary. I mean, if it's a really nice home, then sure, keep the door. But otherwise, you could just brick it up and make it where there's no door anymore. The more doors you have, the more problematic it becomes because you have too many access and entryways. If you do have a door for a basement, then I would recommend one of those Bilco doors. They're going to be these steel doors that kind of fold over the access to the basement. This makes it a lot harder for them to actually get in because a door can be like kicked through. Most of the doors are hollow core doors. You can just put your foot through it. If you haven't properly framed up the door, then they can probably just kick the door down in general. Well, these Bilco doors, you can't really do that. So that makes it where if they go onto the back side of the house, then you do not have to worry as much about them just simply kicking the door open. Of course, in the front of the house, you do want it to be a little bit stronger, a little bit tougher. So just keep that in mind. Chances are, though, the thieves are not going to kick your door open. It's a little bit too much work for them to try to just get in the house for a little bit of copper. Now, as far as alarm systems, we got a couple of them. I personally use SimpliSafe, which I'm not obviously sponsored by SimpliSafe or anything, but I personally use them. For $15 or $25 a month, depending on what your package is, you can put an alarm system on 4 windows and a door, or actually really 4 entry points. That's usually enough. And if, of course, it senses motion, then it can see that. Now, in my experience, using these while contractors are going in and out doesn't really work. A lot of times, the contractors just disable the alarm systems, and they don't want to deal with it. And also, the other problem is you need power in order for these to work, so you will have to get an electrician to string up at least an outlet somewhere. Let's say if you haven't done the rough-in for the electrical and you're trying to protect the property even before then, well, they will have to create an outlet for you real quick. But yeah, realistically, a lot of the contractors have found just kind of disable these things. They don't like keep punching in the code, and sometimes they get messy and dirty, so just be aware of that. That could be a little bit of a problem. But if you are working with a general contractor who is maintaining their contractors, or you are able to visit the site enough, then you can kind of enforce the attitude of, no, we need to reset this. Other alarm systems would be probably fake cameras or maybe lighting. Adding more light to the neighborhood or around your house discourages it. Fake cameras can discourage it. Another thing you want to do is lock boxes on your property. A lockbox basically will allow you to get the contractors in and out. Definitely change the code over time because you do need to defend your property against contractors as well a little bit, even ones you've previously hired. We'll go into that in another video. But essentially, yeah, these are some of the alarm systems I've used. Can you use other ones? Absolutely. I just like SimpliSafe because it does phone the police without needing my involvement. Now, as far as the drug dealers, I've seen a lot of creative solutions about even hiring them for their protective services. Some seasoned investors actually go buy a property, and if they see drug dealers are constantly frequenting the property, or if they're around there a lot, then simply put, he'll say to maybe them, he'll say, hey, every time I come here, if no one has broken in, I'll give you $10. If that's all good and everything's safe, here's $10. It's a minor inconvenience charge that he decided to charge. Sometimes you don't even need to really do this. If you have SimpliSafe strung up around your house and you have a sign outside or some other alarm system, then the fact that the police are going to get called means the drug dealers actually don't want thieves going in your house because that messes up their area, their turf, I guess you can say, where they are selling in that area. So sometimes they will actually stop this from even happening, and that can be beneficial for you. But otherwise, you can try the pay-em strategy. I would recommend becoming comfortable around these type of environments before you start interacting to that level. Just keep that in mind. I'm not necessarily saying that everyone on this video should start paying drug dealers to be protectors of homes. I'm just saying it's a creative solution if you're already used to that area and know how to speak to residents of the neighborhood because you've become very familiar with them and they've become very familiar with you. Now, another bit of thing you got to think about is them stealing your electric. So obviously after you have the electric installed and everything's all good to go, there's a lot of houses in the neighborhood where they might want to try to string up electric. They can either tap into your electric lines or run an extension cord or do a lot of drilling and such to get your electricity and power their home. So they can try to steal your electric. This is something the BGE fights with constantly, and this is something you will probably deal with in these neighborhoods. Unfortunately, it's just a common reality. Oftentimes you will want to check the electric lines that are connected to your meter and just make sure that they haven't been tapped or messed with. If they have been, just simply call BGE. I mean, how to actually stop this gets a little bit tricky. If you have cameras, then it might discourage anyone from doing it because they don't want to get caught. BGE does try to crack down on this. So that is maybe a method, but just be aware that, you know, people do try to steal the electric out of your renovation projects because they know no one's there. Well, anyway, that's realistically the advice I have for you regarding this. That is how I've handled a lot of these problems. I've seen a lot more even creative solutions. Like if you don't want people standing around the property and throwing trash all into the yard, a lot of people have like put a trash bin outside, you know, say, just talk to them, you know, just say, hey guys, you mind just throwing it in this trash can? So that way they're not throwing trash all over the place because it can get you fined a lot. One person even used as creative a solution is putting dog manure all over the yard. I guess you can find normal fertilizer and maybe they'll go away. I'm not saying necessarily to do that, but there are some creative strategies I found to get people to kind of stop congregating around your house. But overall, I have found in my experience, they will go away over time just with you renovating the property. But that's all I have for you today. Let me know if you had any questions regarding this and protecting your property, and I'll tell you all my answers in the comment section below. So I'll talk to you all very soon.